Hello. In this tutorial, I'm going to speak about how to address adjusting exposure values and toning monochromatic images such as old photos or more or less any monochromatic image. So what we're looking at is an old photograph that I pulled from the internet for the sake of the tutorial. You'll see over here on the layers panel, I have the original image down here on the bottom. I created a background copy of it, so I'm not going to actually affect the original image at all. I'm going to only work on copies of the original image. Go ahead and turn this back on. I have two other layers, which are images that are versions of this image that I've already edited. They're not necessarily complete, but they are a lot more close to being finished, and that's what they look like. So I'm going to start with this copy of the background image. This is obviously a very middle gray exposure. So it's either shot this way or probably just aged poorly over time. So the method I use is using the curves tool. You can hit Control M, bring up the curves tool. You can also hit Command M on a Mac and do the same. And you'll see the histogram overlaid, or you'll see the curves tool overlaid on top of the histogram. This histogram is in the back here. You can see this is the darkest part of the image, the lightest part of the image, and kind of the density in between. And then this is the curves line you can adjust. The particular method that I like to use when addressing a monochromatic image, as far as adjusting contrast and general exposure, is I adjust these input sliders down at the bottom. Here's one for the white point, here's one for the black point. If you hold the Alt button or the Option button down on a Mac and slide the black point slider over, the second you click on it, the image will become white. And as you slide it closer where you're approaching the actual values, the lower limit values of the image, you'll notice that the image starts to reappear. And what this is showing you is where the image begins to clip or lose details on the darkest points. So if I bring this over just to kind of overdo it, all those spots that appeared are now solid black and I've lost details, which I don't want to do. I'm going to hit Control Z or Command Z on a Mac to undo that. So if I hold Alt and I drag this over, once I start seeing these values appear, I want to back off just a little bit so they're just after when they disappear. And I'm going to do the same. I'll go ahead and show you the preview. This is before, this is after. So you can see I've brought the darks back in with a more acceptable range. So I'm going to do the same thing on this white point input slider. I'm going to hold Alt and slide this over, and you'll see that it becomes black this time. And what's going to happen is white spots appear as you start to clip different parts of the image. Now these little dots that appear to begin with, these are scratches and stuff that are already almost white, so I don't really need to worry about them in this particular instance. What I need to think about is when I can tell that details of the image, such as the background, start to appear, and I'll back off just until that disappears. You can notice it's a lot more close to what it should be. Turning off the preview, this is what it was before, this is what it is now. Not necessarily perfect, but this is a lot better of an exposure to work with if you're going to address the repairs that need to be done on this image, such as removing these dust spots, because now they're going to be a lot more visible and they'll be more apparent. If you want, from this point, you can actually go ahead and start applying further edits to the exposure. That's a little bit more than I would want, but I'll go ahead and leave it just for the sake of this tutorial. So go ahead and just adjust it a little bit, make it look a little bit more acceptable. Okay, so that's a little bit more as I would leave it. And again, I'm editing the background copy, so I still have the original one underneath if I turn this layer off. So that's my general approach to adjusting the exposure. That's a good starting point when you are addressing an image, a monochromatic image such as this. You can use that same method for a color image. It just works really well in a monochromatic as well. So now what I would like to talk about is how to adjust the tonality, the color tone of this type of image. Like I said, this is an older image pulled from the internet. You can see that there's discoloration spots in the upper right hand corner here, kind of around the edges in general. And I mean, it looked like it used to be a very beautiful, nice sepia tone kind of image. One thing you can do to get rid of the discoloration or the changes in color that shouldn't be there is you can start by desaturating it and then applying a color tone to the image, which will be monochromatic across the entire image instead of having these discoloration spots. You don't have to do that. If you like the discoloration look that it has, then by all means you can leave it, and that's that. So what I like to do is I hit Control Shift U or Command Option U on a Mac, and that's the desaturate command. Now, generally speaking, when you create a black and white image, you don't want to use the desaturate option. You want to go through the image menu, hit adjustments, and select black and white. And this will allow you to adjust the contrast levels in black and white for each colored part of the image, and you'll get a much more accurate, much more effective, and a better result when you're converting a color image to a black and white image. Since this image was originally monochromatic, and even though there's discoloration spots here, using the desaturate option is going to be just as effective as the other option, because you would, in short, be adjusting the contrast of the discoloration spots, which doesn't necessarily do any benefit in this particular circumstance. So now that it's desaturated, it's monochromatic, and I can add any tone that I want to it. There's a couple different ways to do this. You can create your own tone simply by going to the color adjustment tool, which is Control U, which is the hue saturation tool, or Command U on a Mac, which is the same tool. And since you've desaturated it, it doesn't matter if you change the hue up here, it's not going to show up. Whereas if you didn't desaturate it, it would show up. So what you need to do is select this colorize checkbox down here, and that will apply any hue up here that you adjust. So you have any number of different options here. And you can change the intensity of the hue, make it really intense, or you can desaturate it, make it look a little bit more normal, or what I would call normal. And you can get a much more subtle effect. And that's one of the simpler ways to go ahead and do this. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want to apply that. I'm going to show you two other methods of toning your image once it's desaturated. One way that I like to create a sepia tone look is with my layer selected, I'll hit the channels tab and I'll select the red channel. And I'm going to hit Command M or Control M and bring up the curves tool. Then I'm going to hit the preset drop down menu and select lighter. And what I did is I applied a lighter curves to the red channel. Then I'll select the blue channel, hit Command or Control M to bring up the curves tool, and I'm going to apply a darker preset from this drop down to the blue channel. Hit OK, and when I click on the RGB channel to show the composite of all three channels, now it's a sepia tone. And I like using this method because I can duplicate the exact color every single time. You could manually change these channels in all kinds of different ways and develop, a very specific tone that you like, and you can reproduce it exact every time. And you can even create an action where you can just automate the whole process once you get it set up how you like it, and you can apply it to hundreds of images at the same time if you'd like. And the last way that I like to show you about toning your image is a method that will help you get a color tone that is a lot more true to the original tone of the original image. So I'm going to go ahead and undo what we did, go back to the desaturated image. That will allow me to get rid of the discoloration. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select my original image one more time. I'm going to hit Command or Control J, which will duplicate it one more time. I'm going to turn off the layer that we've been working with so we can see the copied layer. And I'm going to go to the filter menu, select blur, and the first option is average. What this does is this averages the light and dark values as well as the color values. So you get one solid block of color for your entire layer, which in most circumstances seems pretty useless. In fact, this is the only method that I've ever used this. What this does, like I said, is it averaged the color values for the original image. And it might look really dark, but the light and dark values actually do not matter in this case, because what we're going to use is I'll go ahead and turn this back on. This is the layer that we've been working with. What I'm going to do is have this layer selected, go to the layer mode drop-down menu, and I'm going to change this to a luminosity layer. And what that's going to do is it's going to apply the light and dark values of this layer to that averaged layer below it. So it's going to maintain the average color of the original image, but apply the new contrast values to it. And since I desaturated it before I created this luminosity layer, I no longer have those discoloration spots, but I have a toned image that looks like what the original image would appear to be if it wasn't, if it didn't decay so badly over time, that kind of thing. And this is a good way to preserve the tonality of the original image based on the information that we have at the current point of time when the image was recaptured into digital form. So this is my tutorial on how to adjust exposure as well as tone monochromatic images. And if you have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.